We're getting a couple new main weapons in Drizzle Season, and the first I'll be talking about is the Dreadringer. This is a slosher class weapon that sloshes twice every time you press ZR. Based on the footage in the trailer, the individual sloshes deal between 34 and 50 damage, as it takes 3 hits from a minimum of 2 sloshes to splat someone. There was a tweet by the official NA account that said, quote, "The slosher has 2 muzzles and fires 2 dollops of ink at once. Hit your target with both and you're in business," unquote. This is confusing because it would seem to imply that the weapon 2 shots, but it clearly takes 3 in the gameplay footage. Furthermore, upon plugging the text of the Japanese tweet into both Google Translate and DeepL, it comes out saying that hitting both sloshes does a lot of damage, or considerable damage, not lethal damage. So I think this is just poorly localized and not an indication that you can press ZR once and splat an undamaged player with this weapon. This weapon is really similar to the sloshing machine, and not just how it looks. It's a slosher weapon, it has midline range, a relatively slow fire rate, and it does about the same amount of damage. A sloshing machine directs for 76 and indirects for 38, which could well be the exact damage numbers of hitting both hitboxes of a Dreadringer versus hitting one hitbox of it. It's hard to tell because we only have so much footage, and that footage is on a map that's not in the game yet, but I believe it has somewhat significantly longer range than the machine and a slower fire rate. The thing is, the player who uses it in the footage loves spinning around in a circle after every slosh instead of just mashing ZR, so it's entirely possible that the animation is cancelable and the fire rate is faster than it looks. As a main weapon, this seems really promising as a zoning weapon, playing a similar role to the more passive kind of playstyle of a sloshing machine or of a rapid blaster. It's not going to splat super quickly, but it's going to hit from far enough away without having to worry about cover too much that it'll be difficult to approach, so frontline weapons will struggle to reach it. As long as it keeps everything else at arm's length, it can make up for its weaknesses. That said, it's hard to do that perfectly, and there are some pretty notable weaknesses. The mechanic where it sloshes twice seems more like a curse than a blessing. Since you only actually need 3 of the sloshes to hit to splat someone, if you aim perfectly, you're always going to be firing an extra slosh that you just don't need, which will slow you down. The main weapon doesn't give it any options for moving quickly, unless you're able to cancel the second slosh somehow, which would be unprecedented. It's a lot like the issue a nozzle nose weapon has, having to wait for the full burst to fire before it can do anything else instead of just being able to put a single dot of paint on the ground like a normal shooter weapon. On top of that, its kit does absolutely nothing to help it move any better. A suction bomb will take longer to paint anything than the slow main weapon will. It might honestly be reasonable to use Reef Slider to retreat sometimes, to use the invincibility to get out of a bad situation, because putting yourself deeper into the enemy's side with this weapon seems like the opposite of a useful thing to do. Reef Slider is weak even for what it is, but Tetradulies and S-Blast can sometimes find something to do with it, since those are weapons that want to be upfront fighting and run a lot of quick respawn, unlike the sort of playstyle I've been describing for the Dreadringer so far. But I don't know, maybe there's another way to look at it here. Dreadringer might end up having to run a lot of quick respawn out of necessity, similar to the Range Blaster or Tentabrella, since it's just probably going to get caught out and get splatted sometimes with its slow fire rate and lack of an ability to paint its own feet. So I guess maybe then, going down with the shark isn't the worst outcome. If it somehow survives the slide, it will be able to reliably combo with the 70 damage indirect of the Reef Slider, maybe even get 2 picks with a single ZR press and a nice flick since each of the 2 hitboxes will combo for lethal damage. It just seems really risky. Outside of that very specific combo, you're not going to want to fight someone up close with this weapon, and I don't know whether that combo is going to be reliable. Maybe as a play when you have Tacticooler and they don't? A defensive zoning playstyle may not be the way to go just given the weapon's ink efficiency. It's going to take at least 2 ZR presses to splat someone, and each of those cost 10% of the ink tank. Combine that with 1 suction bomb, and that's 90% of the ink tank gone. It can be threatening to a player trying to run at it, but it's going to run out of resources pretty quickly. There's a lot to try here, a number of variables we don't know yet, and a lot of approaches to the weapon that it's going to take all of our collective imaginations to fully figure out. If I had to guess though, I'd say this kit will probably be a mid-tier unless the main weapon can do something I'm not anticipating. It's probably not bad at holding its ground, but it's too vulnerable when something happens that it didn't anticipate, and regardless of how well it's going to synergize with its special, it's still a relatively low-value special in the grand scheme of things. Only a couple days until we get to try it out and see for sure though.